The woman who stumbled into Bentonville, Arkansas in the summer of 1878 looked like she had been dragged through hell and barely made it out alive. And Tanner Zimmerman couldn't take his eyes off her from the moment he saw her collapse against the hitching post outside the general store. Her dress was torn and dirty, her dark hair matted with dust and what looked like dried blood, and the bruises on her arms told a story he didn't need words to understand. Tanner had been loading supplies onto his wagon when he heard the gasps from the townspeople gathering around her. He dropped the bag of feed he'd been carrying and rushed over, his boots kicking up dust as he crossed the street. "Madam, are you hurt?" he asked, kneeling beside her as she tried to steady herself against the wooden post. Her eyes, a striking shade of green despite the exhaustion etched across her face, met his with a wariness that made his chest tighten. "I'm fine," she said, her voice hoarse and barely above a whisper. "Just need some water." Tanner didn't believe her for a second, but he nodded and helped her to her feet, feeling how she trembled beneath his touch. She couldn't have been more than 25, though the haunted look in her eyes made her seem older. He guided her toward the general store, aware of the whispers following them like a swarm of mosquitoes. Inside the store, Mrs. Patterson brought water while Tanner helped the woman into a chair. She drank greedily, water spilling down her chin, and he noticed the ring mark on her finger where a wedding band had recently been removed. The skin there was paler than the rest of her sun-weathered hand. "I'm Tanner Zimmerman," he said gently. "I own a ranch about 5 miles north of town." "What's your name?" She hesitated, her fingers gripping the empty cup so tightly her knuckles turned white. "Beatrice Morrison," she finally said, "and I'd appreciate it if you didn't ask me any more questions." The store owner, old Mr. Patterson, leaned over the counter with poorly concealed curiosity. "Where'd you come from, miss? You look like you've been walking for days." Beatrice's jaw tightened, and Tanner shot Mr. Patterson a warning look that made the man step back. "She said she doesn't want to answer questions," Tanner said firmly. He turned back to Beatrice. "Do you have somewhere to stay? Family in town?" "No family," she said, her voice hollow. "I'll find work, find a place. I just need to get my bearings, Mrs." Patterson returned with a wet cloth, and Beatrice took it gratefully, pressing it to her face. Tanner studied her more carefully now, seeing past the grime and exhaustion to the woman beneath. She had delicate features, high cheekbones, and a determined set to her mouth that told him she'd survived worse than whatever had brought her to Bentonville. "My housekeeper quit last month to move back east," Tanner heard himself saying before he could think better of it. "I need someone to cook and keep the house. It's just me and my ranch hands, and we're all terrible at domestic work. I can offer room and board plus wages." Beatrice's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Why would you offer that to a stranger?" "Because you need help, and I need a housekeeper," Tanner said simply. It wasn't the whole truth. Something about her called to a protective instinct he didn't even know he possessed. "It's honest work, and you'd have your own room in the main house. My foreman's wife lives in one of the cabins on the property with their family. You wouldn't be alone or unprotected." She stared at him for a long moment, searching his face for signs of deception or ulterior motives. Tanner kept his expression open and honest, letting her see he meant what he said. Finally, she gave a small nod. "I'll work hard," she said. "I'll earn my keep." "I don't doubt it," Tanner replied, standing and offering his hand to help her up. "Let's get you out to the ranch so you can rest and clean up. We can discuss the details later." The ride to the ranch was quiet except for the creaking of the wagon wheels and the clip-clop of his horse's hooves on the dusty road. Beatrice sat stiffly beside him, her hands folded in her lap, staring straight ahead. Tanner didn't try to make conversation, sensing she needed the silence to collect herself. When they arrived at the ranch, the sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The main house was a sturdy two-story structure Tanner had built with his own hands 5 years ago, with a wraparound porch and shuttered windows. Surrounding it were the bunkhouse, the barn, several corrals, and a few smaller cabins for married ranch hands. "It's beautiful," Beatrice said softly, the first words she'd spoken since they left town. Tanner felt a surge of pride. "Thank you. Took me years to get it to this point." He helped her down from the wagon and led her inside. The interior was sparse but clean, with practical furniture and none of the feminine touches it had lacked since his mother passed away years ago. He showed her to a bedroom on the second floor, a decent-sized room with a bed, a dresser, and a window overlooking the pastures. "Bathrooms down the hall. I'll have one of the hands bring up water for a bath. Take your time getting settled." Beatrice turned to him, and for the first time he saw her eyes glisten with unshed tears. "Why are you being kind to me? You don't know me. Don't need to know your whole story to see you're a person in need," Tanner said. "Everyone deserves a chance to start over." She looked away quickly, brushing at her eyes. "You might regret that generosity when you learn what I am." "And what's that?" "Broken," she whispered. "Too broken to be around decent people." Tanner wanted to ask what had happened to make her believe such a terrible thing about herself, but he held back. Instead, he said, "You get some rest. We'll talk more tomorrow." He left her alone and went downstairs to arrange for the bath water. His foreman, Jack Russell, was waiting in the kitchen with raised eyebrows when Tanner came back down. "You hired a housekeeper without asking any references?" Jack asked, skeptical but not unkind. "She needed help," Tanner said. "And we need someone who can cook something besides beans and hardtack." Jack chuckled. "Can't argue with that. Martha saw you bring her in. She's already preparing a plate of food for the poor woman. Said she looks like she hasn't eaten properly in weeks." "Probably hasn't," Tanner agreed. He looked toward the stairs, wondering about the story behind those bruises and that haunted look. "Make sure the men know she's to be treated with respect. Anyone who steps out of line answers to me." "Understood, boss." That night, Tanner lay in his own bed, unable to sleep, thinking about the woman in the room down the hall. He'd built this ranch from nothing after his parents died, pouring all his energy into creating something lasting and good. At 32, he'd resigned himself to a solitary life. Most women in town either wanted a softer life than ranch living could provide, or they were already married. He'd had a few brief courtships over the years, but nothing that touched his heart deeply enough to make him want to change his bachelor ways. But Beatrice Morrison, with her wounded eyes and fierce independence, had stirred something in him within minutes of meeting her. He told himself it was just compassion, just a desire to help someone clearly in desperate circumstances. But he knew himself well enough to recognize the lie. The next morning, Tanner woke before dawn, as was his habit. He dressed quietly and headed downstairs, surprised to find the kitchen already warm with the stove going and the smell of coffee filling the air. Beatrice stood at the counter, her hair pulled back in a neat braid, wearing a simple dress she must have found in the room. The bruises on her face looked worse in the morning light, purple and yellow stains against her pale skin. "You didn't need to start this early," Tanner said, causing her to jump slightly. "I meant it when I said you should rest." "I'm not one for lying about," she said, not meeting his eyes as she poured coffee into a tin cup. "Besides, I need to earn my keep." "You just got here yesterday," Tanner protested gently, accepting the cup she handed him. The coffee was strong and perfectly brewed, better than anything he'd managed to make for himself. "Give yourself time to recover." Beatrice finally looked at him, her expression guarded. Recovery is a luxury I can't afford. I need to work. I need to be useful. He understood that feeling, the need to keep moving so you didn't have to think about painful things. He'd felt that way after his parents died in the cholera outbreak that swept through the area when he was 23. Work had been his salvation then. All right, he conceded, but if you need to rest, you rest. That's an order from your employer. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. Yes, sir. Over the next few weeks, Beatrice settled into life at the ranch with a determination that impressed everyone who met her. She cooked hearty meals for the ranch hands, kept the house spotless, and even started a small garden behind the main house. She rarely spoke more than necessary, and she never mentioned her past or what had brought her to Bentonville in such terrible condition. Tanner found himself watching her more than he should, noticing small things. The way she hummed quietly while kneading bread dough. The careful way she set the table, as if the placement of each fork and knife mattered deeply. The flash of fear that crossed her face whenever one of the ranch hands raised his voice, even in laughter. He wanted to know her story, but more than that, he wanted to help her heal. So he was patient, treating her with gentle respect and making sure his men did the same. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, she began to relax. The tension in her shoulders eased. She began to offer small smiles when someone thanked her for a meal. One evening in late July, Tanner found her sitting on the porch steps after dinner, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. He sat down beside her, leaving a respectful distance between them. "Mind some company?" he asked. She shook her head, pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders despite the warmth of the evening. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the cicadas sing and the horses whicker softly in the corral. "I was married," Beatrice said suddenly, her voice so quiet he almost missed it. "For 3 years, to a man who seemed kind and gentle when we were courting." Tanner's hands clenched into fists on his knees, but he kept his voice calm. "What happened?" He changed after the wedding. Or maybe he was always that way and just hid it well. She drew a shaky breath. "He had a terrible temper. When he drank, which was often, he'd take it out on me. I tried to be a good wife, tried to do everything right, but nothing was ever good enough." "That wasn't your fault," Tanner said firmly. "A man who strikes a woman is no man at all." Beatrice laughed bitterly. "That's what I kept telling myself. But after a while I started to believe him when he said I deserved it, that I was worthless, stupid, ugly, that no one else would ever want me. He was a liar." She turned to look at him then, her eyes shimmering with tears in the fading light. "Was he? Look at me, Tanner. I'm damaged goods. I'm jumpy and scared, and I flinch at loud noises. I wake up screaming from nightmares. I'm too broken for any kind of normal life, let alone for love." Tanner shifted closer, slowly enough that she could move away if she wanted. She didn't. "You're not broken," he said gently. "You're healing. There's a difference. You're kind to say that, but you don't understand. The things he did, the things he said, they're written into my bones now. I can't just forget them or pretend they didn't happen." "I'm not asking you to forget," Tanner said. "I'm just asking you to consider that what he told you were lies designed to control you. You're not worthless or stupid or ugly. You're strong enough to survive hell and brave enough to start over in a strange place with nothing. You're beautiful and capable and worthy of respect." Beatrice shook her head, but he could see his words were reaching her, cracking the armor of self-loathing she'd built around herself. "Even if that were true, I couldn't burden someone else with all my damage. I couldn't inflict myself on another person." "What if that person wanted to know you, damage and all?" Tanner asked, his heart pounding. He was saying too much, revealing too much, but he couldn't seem to stop himself. What if they saw your strength and your courage and wanted to stand beside you while you healed? She stared at him, understanding dawning in her eyes. Tanner, you can't mean that. You barely know me. I know enough, he said. I know you work harder than anyone needs to. I know you're kind to the animals and patient with the ranch hands. I know you make the best biscuits I've ever tasted, and you hum old hymns when you think no one's listening. I know that despite everything you've been through, you haven't let it make you bitter or cruel. That's not love, Beatrice protested, but her voice was weak. That's just you being a good man. Maybe it's not love yet, Tanner admitted, but it could be if you'd give it a chance. Give me a chance to show you that not all men are like your husband. That some of us know how to cherish what's precious. Beatrice stood abruptly, wrapping her arms around herself. I can't, she whispered. I'm too broken for love. Tanner stood too, but he didn't try to touch her. Love doesn't need perfect, he said softly. It needs real. And you're the most real person I've ever met. She fled then, hurrying into the house and up the stairs. Tanner let her go, hoping he hadn't pushed too hard, too fast. But the truth was out now, hanging in the air between them like morning mist. The next few days were awkward. Beatrice avoided being alone with him, keeping herself busy with endless chores. Tanner gave her space, but he made sure she knew his feelings hadn't changed. He complimented her cooking. He thanked her for her hard work. He treated her with the same gentle respect he always had. On Saturday, Jack's wife, Martha, invited Beatrice to come to town with her for the weekly market. Tanner watched from the barn as the two women climbed into the wagon, Beatrice looking nervous but determined. He hoped spending time with another woman might help her, give her someone to talk to besides the men on the ranch. They returned in the late afternoon, and Tanner noticed immediately that something had changed. Beatrice's face was pale, her hands shaking as she helped Martha unload the supplies. He approached quickly, concerned. What happened? He asked. Martha looked grim. There was a man in town asking about a woman matching Beatrice's description, said he was looking for his wife who'd run away. Tanner's blood ran cold. Did he see you? No, Martha said. We heard him talking to the sheriff and left out the back of the general store. But Tanner, he's still there. He's staying at the boarding house until he finds her. Beatrice had gone completely white, swaying on her feet. Tanner caught her elbow, steadying her. He won't find you, he said firmly. You're safe here. You don't understand, Beatrice gasped, terror making her voice shake. Richard doesn't give up. He'll search every ranch, every farm. He'll find me. Not if we don't let him, Tanner said. He looked at Martha and Jack, who had come over to see what was wrong. Pass the word to all the hands. If a stranger comes asking questions, we've never seen a woman matching Beatrice's description. Everyone understand. They both nodded, and Martha put a comforting arm around Beatrice's shoulders. You're one of us now, dear. We protect our own. That night, Tanner kept watch from the porch, a rifle across his knees. He didn't really expect Richard Morrison to show up in the dark, but he wasn't taking any chances. Around midnight, the front door opened and Beatrice stepped out, wrapped in a blanket. You should be sleeping, Tanner said. So should you, she replied, sitting down in the rocking chair beside him. But I suppose neither of us will until he's gone. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the night sounds. Finally, Beatrice spoke. I should leave. I'm putting you all in danger. You're not going anywhere, Tanner said firmly. This is your home now. He'll hurt you, Beatrice whispered. Richard's not just cruel, he's dangerous. He carries a gun and he's not afraid to use it. If he finds out you're hiding me, if he thinks there's something between us, he'll kill you. He can try, Tanner said grimly. But I've dealt with dangerous men before. This is wild country, Beatrice. We all know how to protect ourselves. I couldn't bear it if you got hurt because of me, she said, her voice breaking. I couldn't live with that. Tanner set the rifle aside and turned to face her. Listen to me. I'm not afraid of your husband. I'm not going to let him take you back to a life of being beaten and terrorized. You deserve better than that. You deserve to be safe and happy and free. Why do you care so much? Beatrice asked, tears streaming down her face. Why are you willing to risk so much for someone as broken as me? Because you're not broken, Tanner said, moving to kneel in front of her chair. You're wounded, yes, you're scared, but you're also the strongest, bravest woman I've ever known. And I care about you because I can't help it. From the moment I saw you in town, something in me recognized something in you, like we were meant to find each other. Beatrice reached out tentatively, touching his face with trembling fingers. I want to believe you, she whispered. I want to believe I could be whole again, that I could be worthy of someone like you, but I'm so scared. I know, Tanner said, covering her hand with his, but you don't have to be scared alone anymore. Let me help you. Let me stand with you. She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. What if I can't be what you need? What if I'm too damaged to love anyone properly? Then we'll figure it out together, Tanner said. Love isn't about being perfect. It's about being real with each other, scars and all. Beatrice pulled back to look at him, searching his face in the moonlight. Whatever she saw there must have convinced her, because she nodded slowly. All right, she said. I'll try. I'll try to believe I can be more than what Richard made me think I was. Tanner smiled, feeling hope bloom in his chest. That's all I'm asking. The next morning, Sheriff Davis rode out to the ranch. Tanner met him in the yard, trying to appear casual despite the tension coiling in his gut. Morning, Tanner, the sheriff said, dismounting. He was a fair man in his 50s who'd known Tanner since he was a boy. Got a situation in town I need to ask you about. What kind of situation? Man came in yesterday looking for his wife. Says she ran off a few weeks back, might have come this way. Name's Richard Morrison from Fort Smith. He's pretty insistent on finding her, says she's not well in the head and he's worried about her. Tanner kept his expression neutral. What's this got to do with me? Sheriff Davis looked uncomfortable. He's asking about all the ranches in the area, wanting to know if anyone's hired new help recently, particularly women. I told him I'd ask around, though between you and me, something about him doesn't sit right. Trust your gut, Sheriff, Tanner said. It's usually right. Have you hired anyone new? The sheriff asked, though his tone suggested he was asking out of obligation rather than real interest. Jack's cousin helped out for a few days last month, but he's moved on, Tanner lied smoothly. Why? What's this woman supposed to look like? Dark hair, green eyes, about 25 years old. Pretty from what he says, though he claims she's got some bruises from falling down. The sheriff's expression made it clear what he thought about that story. Haven't seen anyone like that, Tanner said. If I do, should I send word to you or to Morrison directly? To me, Sheriff Davis said firmly. Like I said, something about him bothers me. The way he talks about his wife like she's property that ran away instead of a person who left. Makes me think maybe she had good reason to go. Relief flooded through Tanner. I'll keep an eye out and let you know if I see anything. The sheriff nodded, mounting his horse again. Appreciate it, Tanner. And if you do happen to have hired someone who's running from a bad situation, well, I'd say they're probably better off wherever they are now than going back. After the sheriff left, Tanner went inside to find Beatrice hiding in the pantry, her face pale with fear. He's gone, Tanner said gently. And the sheriff's on our side. He doesn't trust your husband. Richard can be very convincing when he wants to be, Beatrice said, her voice shaking. He'll charm everyone in town, make them think I'm the crazy one. Maybe, Tanner conceded. But people around here are pretty good judges of character. Give them some credit. Over the next week, Richard Morrison made himself a fixture in Bentonville, visiting every business and ranch within 20 miles, asking about his missing wife. Each time someone came to the ranch, Beatrice hid, and each time Tanner told the same lie about not having seen her. The other ranch hands backed up his story without hesitation, closing ranks around the woman they'd come to respect and care for. But the strain was taking its toll on Beatrice. She grew quieter, more withdrawn, jumping at every sound. Tanner tried to comfort her, to reassure her, but he could see the fear eating away at the fragile confidence she'd been building. Finally, nearly 2 weeks after Richard arrived in town, Sheriff Davis rode out to the ranch again. This time his expression was grave. "Morrison's getting aggressive," the sheriff said. "He's accused me of not doing enough to find his wife. He's threatening to organize a search party of his own, check every building in the county. I can hold him off for a while, but Tanner, I need to know the truth. Is she here?" Tanner looked at the man who'd been a fixture in his life for as long as he could remember, a man he trusted completely. "Yes," he said quietly, "she's here." The sheriff nodded slowly. "Is she here by choice?" "Is she safe?" "Completely by choice," Tanner said. "And yes, she's safe, or at least she was until her husband showed up looking for her. He hurt her, from what I can tell, regularly and badly." Sheriff Davis swore under his breath. "I thought as much. Problem is, legally she's still his wife. He has a right to see her, to take her home if she agrees to go." "She won't agree," Tanner said firmly. "I don't doubt it, but Morrison isn't going to accept that easily. And if he finds out you've been hiding her, there's going to be trouble." "Let there be trouble then," Tanner said. "I'm not handing her over to a man who beats her." The sheriff studied him for a long moment. "You care about her." "I love her," Tanner admitted, the words feeling right as he said them. "And I'll do whatever it takes to keep her safe. Even if it means breaking the law, even then." Sheriff Davis sighed. "I didn't hear that. But Tanner, be careful. Morrison strikes me as the kind of man who won't hesitate to use violence if he doesn't get what he wants. I'll do what I can to run him out of town, but you need to be ready for trouble." That night, Tanner called a meeting with all his ranch hands. Beatrice sat in the corner of the room, looking small and frightened as he explained the situation. "I'm not going to order any of you to take a risk you're not comfortable with," Tanner said. "But Richard Morrison is looking for Beatrice, and if he finds her, I believe he'll hurt her or worse. I'm asking you all to help me protect her. Anyone who wants out, no hard feelings, but speak up now." The men looked at each other, then at Beatrice, then back at Tanner. Jack spoke first. "I've got a wife and kids, boss. I know what it means to protect the people you love. We're with you." The others nodded in agreement, and Tanner felt gratitude swell in his chest. "Thank you, all of you." They set up a watch system, making sure someone was always keeping an eye on the road leading to the ranch. Tanner moved Beatrice's things into a storage room in the cellar, a hiding place she could reach quickly if needed. They rehearsed what to do if Richard showed up, making sure everyone knew their role. 3 days later, their preparations were put to the test. One of the ranch hands came running to the house, breathless. "Rider coming fast from town. Looks angry." Tanner moved quickly, ushering Beatrice toward the cellar. "Stay hidden until I come get you," he said. "No matter what you hear, don't come out." "Tanner, please be careful," she said, gripping his arm. "Don't let him provoke you. He's good at making people lose their temper." "I'll be fine," Tanner promised, though his heart was pounding. He kissed her forehead quickly, then helped her down into the cellar and closed the door, sliding a rug over the entrance. By the time Richard Morrison rode into the yard, Tanner was standing on the porch, rifle in hand. The man who dismounted was tall and well-dressed, with dark hair and a handsome face that would have been pleasant if not for the cold cruelty in his eyes. "You Zimmerman?" Richard asked, his voice smooth and controlled. "I am. What can I do for you?" I'm Richard Morrison. I believe you're harboring my wife. I don't know what you're talking about, Tanner said calmly. I haven't seen your wife. Richard's smile was predatory. Now, I don't think that's true. See, I've asked around town about you. People say you're an honest man, a good man. But you're also protective of those you care about. And I heard you took in a woman a few weeks back, right around the time my wife disappeared. I hired a housekeeper, Tanner said. Mary Johnson. She's from Little Rock, has good references. I'd like to see her. She's not here. It's her day off. She went to visit friends in town. Richard took a step closer, his hand resting on the gun at his hip. You're lying to me, Zimmerman. My wife is here and I want her back. She's my property, legally and in the eyes of God. A woman isn't property, Tanner said, anger making his voice hard. And if your wife did run away from you, maybe you should ask yourself why. Beatrice is confused, Richard said, his mask of civility slipping. She gets ideas in her head, makes up stories. I only ever tried to help her, to guide her, but she's stubborn, needs a firm hand sometimes to keep her in line. Is that what you call it? Tanner said. From what I understand, you did more than guide her. You terrorized her. Richard's eyes narrowed. So she is here. I knew it. Now step aside and let me take my wife home. No. The word hung in the air between them, sharp and final. Richard's hand moved toward his gun, and Tanner raised his rifle, aiming it squarely at the other man's chest. Around the yard, the ranch hands had appeared, all armed, all watching. You're outnumbered, Tanner said quietly. And if you draw that weapon, you won't leave this ranch alive. Richard looked around, calculating his odds. Slowly, he moved his hand away from his gun. This isn't over, he said. She's my wife. I have legal rights. Take it up with the sheriff, Tanner said, but you're not getting past me today. Richard mounted his horse, his face twisted with rage. You think you can keep her from me? I'll be back with the law, with federal marshals if I have to. And when I get her back, I'm going to make her pay for every day she's been gone. I'm going to make you both pay. He rode off, kicking his horse into a gallop. Tanner didn't lower his rifle until Richard was out of sight. Then he turned and went back into the house, his hands shaking slightly with residual adrenaline. He opened the cellar door to find Beatrice huddled at the bottom of the stairs, tears streaming down her face. I heard everything, she whispered. Oh God, Tanner, what have I done? I've brought this all down on you. You haven't done anything wrong, Tanner said, helping her up the stairs and into his arms. She collapsed against him, sobbing, and he held her tightly, feeling her whole body shake. We're going to figure this out. He'll never stop, Beatrice said. He'll make good on his threats. He'll get the law involved, and they'll force me to go back to him because I'm his wife. Tanner pulled back to look at her, an idea forming in his mind. Not if you're not his wife anymore. What do you mean? Divorce is nearly impossible, especially for a woman. I'd have to prove terrible things, and even then most judges won't grant it. I'm not talking about divorce, Tanner said. I'm talking about his death. Beatrice's eyes widened. Tanner, no, you can't kill him. That would make you a murderer. I won't let you destroy yourself for me. I'm not going to kill him, Tanner said, though the thought had crossed his mind. But if something were to happen to him, say an accident of some kind, you'd be free. That's not going to happen, Beatrice said. Richard's too careful, too smart. He survived this long by being paranoid and vicious. Tanner sighed, knowing she was right. Then we'll find another way. Maybe we can get the sheriff to run him out of town for threatening us. He'll just come back with more men, more authority, Beatrice said. She pulled away from Tanner, wrapping her arms around herself. I should go. I should leave and take this problem with me. Maybe if I go far enough away to California or somewhere, he'll eventually give up. I'm not letting you go, Tanner said firmly. Beatrice, I meant what I said before. I love you. I know it's fast, I know we barely know each other in some ways, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Stay here. Let me protect you. Let me fight for you." "But you could die," Beatrice whispered. "Richard could kill you and it would be my fault." "Or we could win," Tanner said. "We could find a way to keep you safe and build a life together. Don't you think that's worth fighting for?" Beatrice looked at him with such longing and fear mixed together that it broke his heart. "I want to believe that's possible," she said. "But I'm so scared of hoping for something good only to have it ripped away." "Then let me be brave enough for both of us," Tanner said, taking her hands in his. "Beatrice Morrison, I know you've been hurt. I know you think you're broken beyond repair. But I see you, the real you, and you're the strongest, most beautiful person I've ever met. I love you, scars and all. And if you'll let me, I want to spend the rest of my life showing you what real love looks like. Not control or cruelty, but partnership and respect and tenderness." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I'm too broken for love," she protested weakly. "Love doesn't need perfect," Tanner said, echoing the words he'd spoken before. "It needs real. And this, what I feel for you, what I think you feel for me, this is as real as it gets." Beatrice stared at him for a long moment, then she nodded slowly. "I do love you," she whispered. "I tried not to. I told myself it was impossible, that I couldn't feel that way again after everything Richard did. But I can't help it. When I'm with you, I feel safe. I feel like maybe I could be whole again someday." Tanner pulled her close, kissing her forehead, her cheeks, the tip of her nose. "You are whole," he murmured. "You always have been. He just tried to convince you otherwise." She lifted her face to his, and he kissed her properly, gently, letting her set the pace. She kissed him back with a desperate kind of hope, her hands fisting in his shirt as if she was afraid he might disappear. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Tanner rested his forehead against hers. "We'll figure this out," he promised. "Together." The next day, Tanner rode into town to talk to Sheriff Davis. He found the lawman in his office, looking frustrated and tired. "Morrison's been making my life hell," the sheriff said when Tanner walked in. "He's filed a formal complaint claiming you're holding his wife against her will. He wants me to get a warrant to search your ranch." "Will you?" Tanner asked. "I can stall for a while, but eventually I'll have to do something," Sheriff Davis admitted. "The law's on his side, Tanner, at least on paper. She's his wife." "What if she wasn't?" Tanner said. "What if we could prove he's been abusing her? Would that make a difference?" "Maybe, if we had witnesses or medical evidence. But getting people to testify against a husband in a domestic matter is nearly impossible. Most folks think what happens between a man and his wife is their own business." Tanner slammed his hand on the desk in frustration. "So we're just supposed to hand her over to a man who's beaten her bloody? That's justice. That's the law," the sheriff said grimly. "I don't like it any more than you do, but my hands are tied." Tanner left the sheriff's office feeling defeated. He rode slowly back to the ranch, trying to think of a solution that didn't involve bloodshed. When he arrived, Jack met him in the yard with news that made his blood run cold. "Morrison was here again while you were gone," Jack said. "Came with 3 other men, all armed. Said he was giving us one more chance to hand over his wife before he came back with federal marshals." "How did Beatrice react?" "Martha's got her in the cabin, trying to calm her down. She had a panic attack when she saw Morrison through the window. Tanner, we can't keep this up. Something's got to give." Tanner found Beatrice in Jack and Martha's cabin, curled up on their sofa with her arms wrapped around her knees. Martha was sitting beside her, stroking her hair and murmuring soothing words. When Beatrice saw Tanner, she launched herself at him and he caught her, holding her trembling body close. "He's going to win," she sobbed. "He's going to take me back and kill me. I know he will. He said as much the last time I tried to leave him." "I won't let that happen," Tanner said fiercely. I swear to you, Beatrice, I will not let him take you. But how can you stop him? He has the law on his side. Tanner's mind raced, and suddenly an idea came to him, wild and possibly illegal, but it might just work. What if you weren't married to him anymore? We already talked about this. Divorce is impossible. I'm not talking about divorce, Tanner said slowly. What if Richard Morrison was declared dead? Beatrice pulled back to stare at him. But he's not dead. No, but if he disappeared, if there was no body found but evidence suggested he'd met with foul play, eventually he'd be declared dead. It might take years, but you'd be free. Are you suggesting we actually kill him? Beatrice asked, horrified. No, Tanner said, though part of him thought the world would be better off without Richard Morrison in it. I'm suggesting we make him want to disappear on his own. Maybe if we make it too expensive or too dangerous for him to keep searching for you, he'll give up and move on. You don't know Richard, Beatrice said. He doesn't give up. He sees me as his property, something that belongs to him. He'll never stop looking. Before Tanner could respond, a gunshot cracked through the air outside. Everyone froze, then scrambled for the door. In the yard, they found one of the ranch hands on the ground, bleeding from a shoulder wound. Standing at the edge of the property, barely visible in the growing darkness, were 4 figures on horseback. Richard Morrison's voice carried across the distance. That's a warning, Zimmerman. Next time I won't aim for the shoulder. You have until sunrise tomorrow to send my wife out, or I'm coming in with guns blazing. Tanner helped the wounded ranch hand into the house while Martha ran for medical supplies. The bullet had gone clean through the man's shoulder, a painful but not fatal wound. As Martha worked to clean and bandage it, Tanner made a decision. We can't wait for him to make the next move, he said to Jack and the other hands who had gathered. He's escalated to violence. Someone's going to end up dead if we don't act. What are you suggesting? Jack asked. I'm going to go talk to him, Tanner said. Try to reason with him one more time. That's suicide, Beatrice said, appearing in the doorway. He'll kill you, maybe, Tanner admitted. But maybe if I can appeal to whatever shred of humanity he has left, he'll see reason. He has no humanity left, Beatrice said flatly. Richard Morrison is a monster wearing a man's face. Please don't do this. Tanner took her hands, looking into her terrified eyes. I have to try. I can't just sit here and wait for him to attack. People could die, you could get hurt. I'd rather die than lose you, Beatrice whispered. You're not going to lose me, Tanner said, hoping it was true. He kissed her deeply, pouring all his love and fear into it. When he pulled back, he said, if something does happen to me, Jack knows where my will is. Everything goes to you. The ranch, the money, all of it, you'll be taken care of. I don't want your money, Beatrice said, tears streaming down her face. I want you. Then pray I come back, Tanner said. He grabbed his rifle and his pistol, checking that both were loaded. Then he walked out into the darkness, leaving behind the woman he loved and possibly walking toward his death. He found Richard Morrison and his men camped about a quarter-mile from the ranch, a small fire casting dancing shadows across their faces. Richard stood as Tanner approached, his hand on his gun. Come to hand over my wife, Richard asked. Come to talk sense into you, Tanner said. Morrison, why are you doing this? Your wife left you. That should tell you something about the state of your marriage. My marriage is fine, Richard said coldly. Beatrice just needs to be reminded of her place. Her place? Tanner felt anger burning in his gut. She's a person, not a possession. And from what she's told me, you've spent 3 years beating that into her. No wonder she ran. Beatrice is a liar, Richard said. She's always making up stories, trying to make me look bad. I've been nothing but a good husband to her. A good husband doesn't leave bruises, Tanner said. A good husband doesn't make his wife so scared she'd rather run away with nothing than stay one more day. Richard's expression turned ugly. "You're sleeping with her, aren't you? That's what this is about. You want her for yourself." "I love her," Tanner said simply. "And yes, I want her for myself. But more than that, I want her to be safe and happy, something she'll never be if she goes back to you." "She's my wife," Richard snarled. "Mine, and I'm going to take her back, even if I have to go through you to do it." "Then you'll have to go through me," Tanner said, "because I'm not letting you take her." Richard drew his gun, and Tanner's hand moved to his own weapon, but before either could fire, a shot rang out from the darkness. Richard jerked, a red stain blooming on his chest, and fell backward. His men scrambled for their weapons, shouting in confusion. Tanner dove for cover behind a rock, trying to figure out where the shot had come from. More gunfire erupted, and Richard's men returned fire blindly into the darkness. Then, as quickly as it started, it was over. Richard lay dead by the fire, and his men were fleeing on horseback, apparently deciding their loyalty didn't extend to dying for a dead man's vendetta. Tanner waited a moment, making sure it wasn't a trap, then stood slowly. Sheriff Davis emerged from the darkness, a rifle in his hands and a grim expression on his face. "Sheriff," Tanner said, shocked. "Did you just kill Richard Morrison?" "I did," the sheriff said calmly. "And I'll swear in any court that he drew on you first, that I fired to protect a law-abiding citizen from being murdered." "But why?" "Because I talked to some people in Fort Smith," Sheriff Davis said. "Turns out Richard Morrison has a history. This wasn't the first time he'd beaten a woman half to death. His first wife died under suspicious circumstances that were never properly investigated. I wasn't going to let him kill another woman or a good man trying to protect her." Tanner felt like his legs might give out. "You could lose your job for this. You could be charged with murder." "Maybe," the sheriff said. "But I can sleep at night knowing I did the right thing. Now help me get this body on his horse. We'll take him to town, and I'll file a report saying he drew on you and I had to intervene." His men ran off, so there's no one to contradict the story. Together, they loaded Richard's body onto his horse and led it back toward the ranch. Beatrice was standing on the porch when they arrived, and when she saw the body, her knees buckled. Tanner rushed to catch her. "He's dead," Tanner said gently. "It's over. You're free." Beatrice stared at Richard's lifeless form, and a complex mix of emotions crossed her face: relief, grief, guilt, and finally liberation. "Is it really over?" she whispered. "It's really over," Sheriff Davis confirmed. "You're a widow now, Mrs. Morrison, free to do whatever you want with your life." Beatrice turned to Tanner, and for the first time since he'd met her, he saw her smile without any shadow of fear behind it. "Free," she repeated wonderingly. "I'm actually free." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. The sheriff filed his report, ruling Richard Morrison's death a justifiable homicide in defense of another person. Richard's men, when questioned, claimed they'd been hired to help find a missing woman and knew nothing about Morrison's intentions to harm anyone. Without evidence to the contrary, they were released and left the area quickly. Beatrice went through the motions of mourning, as was expected, but Tanner could see the weight lifting from her shoulders day by day. She smiled more. She laughed at the ranch hands' jokes. She started planning improvements to the garden and talking about the future as if she actually believed she'd have one. 3 months after Richard's death, on a crisp October morning, Tanner found Beatrice in the garden, harvesting the last of the vegetables before the first frost. He watched her for a moment, marveling at how different she looked from the broken woman who'd stumbled into Bentonville back in July. She was still healing, still had moments when the trauma of her past marriage surfaced, but she was getting stronger every day. "Beatrice," he said, and she turned with a smile that made his heart skip. "Good morning," she said. "The pumpkins came in beautifully. I think we'll have enough for pies through Christmas." "That's good," Tanner said, suddenly nervous. He'd planned this moment carefully, but now that it was here, the words seemed to stick in his throat. "Can we talk for a minute?" Beatrice set down her basket and brushed dirt from her hands. "Of course. Is something wrong?" "No, everything's right," Tanner said. He took her hands in his, feeling them warm and rough from work. "Beatrice, these past few months with you have been the happiest of my life. When I wake up and smell your coffee brewing, when I come home to your cooking, when I see you laughing with Martha or playing with Jack's kids, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Beatrice's eyes started to glisten with tears. "Tanner, let me finish," he said gently. "I know you've been through hell. I know the idea of marriage probably terrifies you after what you experienced, but I want you to know that I'm not Richard Morrison. I will never hurt you or try to control you. I will spend every day of my life making sure you feel safe and loved and cherished." He pulled a small box from his pocket and dropped to one knee. Beatrice gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Beatrice Morrison, I love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person. You are my best friend, my partner, the person I want to share my life with. Will you marry me?" Beatrice was crying openly now, tears streaming down her face as she stared at the simple gold band in the box. "I'm still broken in so many ways," she whispered. "I have nightmares. I flinch at raised voices. Sometimes I can't stand to be touched. Are you sure you want to take on all of that?" "I'm sure," Tanner said firmly. "Because you're not broken, Beatrice. You're healing. And I want to be part of that healing. I want to show you every day what real love looks like. Love that's patient and kind. Love that protects and trusts and hopes. Love that never fails." Beatrice pulled him to his feet and threw her arms around his neck. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, I'll marry you. I love you so much, Tanner Zimmerman." He slid the ring onto her finger and kissed her thoroughly, tasting salt from her tears and sweetness from her lips. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Beatrice looked at her ring and then at him. "I never thought I'd want to be married again," she admitted. "I thought marriage meant ownership, control, fear. But with you, it means partnership and love and freedom to be myself. You've shown me that not all men are like Richard. That love doesn't have to hurt." "Love should never hurt," Tanner said. "Real love builds up, it doesn't tear down. And Beatrice, I promise you, I will spend the rest of my life building you up." They were married in November, a small ceremony in the parlor of the ranch house with just close friends and neighbors in attendance. Martha helped Beatrice make a simple but beautiful dress from cream-colored fabric, ordered from Little Rock. Sheriff Davis gave Beatrice away, having become something of a father figure to her in the months since Richard's death. When Tanner saw Beatrice walking toward him, her face radiant with joy and her eyes clear and bright, he felt his throat tighten with emotion. This woman, who had been so broken and frightened just a few months ago, now stood before him whole and strong, ready to start a new life. The circuit preacher who performed the ceremony kept it short and sweet. When he pronounced them husband and wife, Tanner kissed Beatrice gently, mindful of her still healing relationship with physical affection. But she kissed him back with a passion that made some of the guests whistle and cheer. "Mrs. Zimmerman," Tanner whispered against her lips, and she smiled. "I like the sound of that," she said. "A new name for a new life." The wedding celebration lasted into the evening, with Martha's cooking and Jack's fiddle playing and dancing in the barn. Tanner watched Beatrice laugh and dance with the ranch hand's children, saw her deep in conversation with the other women, noticed how comfortable she'd become in her own skin. Later that night, in the privacy of their bedroom, Beatrice was quiet as she prepared for bed. Tanner could sense her nervousness and understood why. Her first marriage had started with violence that only escalated over time. We don't have to do anything you're not ready for, he said gently. There's no rush. We have the rest of our lives. Beatrice turned to him, her eyes vulnerable but trusting. I want to, she said quietly. I want to replace the bad memories with good ones. I want to know what it's like to be loved properly. Tanner crossed to her slowly, giving her time to change her mind. He cupped her face in his hands, looking into her eyes. We go at your pace, he said. You tell me if anything feels wrong or scary. This is about love and connection, not obligation or duty. Understand, she nodded, leaning into his touch. I trust you, she whispered, and those 3 words meant more to him than anything else she could have said. He kissed her slowly, gently, letting her feel his love in every touch. And when they came together, it was with tenderness and patience and care. Afterward, Beatrice cried, but they were tears of healing, of finally understanding what it meant to be loved without pain. Thank you, she whispered, curled against his chest, for showing me that love doesn't have to hurt, that I'm worthy of gentleness and respect. You are worthy of everything good in this world, Tanner said, holding her close. And I'm going to spend my life proving that to you. Winter came to the ranch, blanketing everything in snow and bringing a peaceful quiet to the land. Beatrice thrived in her new role as Tanner's wife, managing the household with quiet efficiency while also beginning to find her own interests and passions. She started teaching some of the ranch hands' children to read, having been well educated before her marriage to Richard. She took up painting, covering canvases with landscapes of the Arkansas hills and valleys. Sometimes she still had nightmares, waking up gasping and crying. But Tanner was always there, holding her and reminding her she was safe. Over time, the nightmares came less frequently, replaced by dreams of their future together. In the spring, Beatrice discovered she was pregnant. She told Tanner one morning over breakfast, her eyes both excited and terrified. What if I'm a terrible mother? She asked. What if I'm too damaged to raise a child properly? You're going to be an amazing mother, Tanner said, pulling her into his arms. You're kind and patient and strong. Our child is lucky to have you. What if I pass on my fear? Beatrice worried. What if I can't protect them the way I should? Then we'll figure it out together, Tanner said. That's what partners do. We face the challenges together. The pregnancy was difficult at times, bringing up memories of the miscarriage Beatrice had suffered during her first marriage, a loss Richard had blamed her for. But Tanner was patient and supportive, attending to her needs and reassuring her constantly. In December of 1879, 18 months after Beatrice first stumbled into Bentonville, she gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Thomas, after Tanner's father. When the doctor placed the squalling infant in her arms, Beatrice cried with joy and relief. He's perfect, she whispered, counting his tiny fingers and toes. Just like his mother, Tanner said, kissing her sweaty forehead. Watching Beatrice with their son, Tanner marveled at the transformation. The broken, frightened woman he'd first met had blossomed into a confident, loving mother and wife. She still had scars, both physical and emotional, from her time with Richard Morrison, but they no longer defined her. She'd taken those broken pieces and forged them into something new and beautiful. One evening when Thomas was about 6 months old, Tanner found Beatrice sitting on the porch steps, watching the sunset with their son sleeping in her arms. He sat down beside her, putting his arm around her shoulders. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how far I've come," Beatrice said softly. 2 years ago, I was convinced I'd die at Richard's hands. I thought I was too broken to ever be whole again. But you showed me that broken things can heal if they're given enough love and patience. You did the healing, Tanner said. I just gave you a safe place to do it. You gave me more than that, Beatrice said, turning to look at him. You gave me back my life. You showed me what real love looks like. You proved that I was worthy of good things even when I couldn't see it myself." "You were always worthy," Tanner said. "You just needed someone to help you remember." Beatrice leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat together in comfortable silence, watching their son sleep and the sun paint the sky in brilliant colors. It wasn't a perfect life. They still had challenges to face, hurts to heal, struggles to overcome. But it was real, built on honesty and trust and deep, abiding love. "Do you ever regret it?" Beatrice asked quietly. "Taking in a stranger with so much baggage?" "Not for a single second," Tanner said firmly. "You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Beatrice. You and Thomas both." She smiled, that full, genuine smile that still took his breath away. "I love you, Tanner Zimmerman." "I love you too," he said. "My beautiful, strong, brave wife." As the years passed, their family grew. 2 years after Thomas, Beatrice gave birth to twin daughters, Emma and Alina. 3 years after that, another son, Henry. The ranch prospered under Tanner's careful management and Beatrice's organizational skills. They became pillars of the Bentonville community, known for their generosity and kindness. Beatrice never completely forgot her first marriage or the trauma Richard had inflicted. But those memories faded into the background, overshadowed by the love and joy she'd found with Tanner. She became an advocate for other women in difficult situations, quietly helping those who needed to escape violent marriages find safe places to go. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Tanner took Beatrice to the same spot where he'd proposed. The garden was in full bloom, bursting with color and life. "I wanted to remind you of something," Tanner said, taking her hands in his. 10 years ago, you told me you were too broken for love. Do you remember what I said?" Beatrice smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "You said love doesn't need perfect, it needs real." "And I was right," Tanner said. "This life we've built, this family we've created, it's not perfect. We've had hard times and struggles, but it's real. It's honest and true and built on a foundation of love that gets stronger every day." "You saved me," Beatrice said softly. "No," Tanner corrected gently. "You saved yourself. You were brave enough to run, brave enough to accept help, brave enough to love again even after everything you'd been through. I just had the privilege of being there while you healed." Beatrice kissed him, pouring a decade of love and gratitude into it. When they pulled apart, she said, "Thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. Thank you for believing I was worth saving. Thank you for taking a chance on a stubborn rancher who fell in love with you at first sight," Tanner replied. They walked back to the house hand in hand, their 4 children playing in the yard, the ranch sprawling around them like a promise kept. Beatrice had come to this place broken and afraid, convinced she was beyond redemption. But love, patient and persistent, had proven her wrong. She'd learned that healing was possible, that second chances were real, and that sometimes the best things in life came from the darkest moments. As Beatrice helped her daughters with their evening chores, and Tanner taught their sons to care for the horses, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the terrified woman who'd collapsed in Bentonville to the confident mother and wife she'd become, the transformation was remarkable. But it hadn't been magic or luck. It had been love, the real kind that Tanner had promised her. Love that was patient through her nightmares and fears. Love that celebrated her strengths and supported her weaknesses. Love that saw her scars and called them beautiful because they proved how strong she was. That night, after the children were tucked into bed, Beatrice and Tanner sat together on the porch swing, wrapped in a blanket against the cool autumn air. The ranch was quiet except for the distant sounds of cattle and the chirping of crickets. "Do you ever think about that day I stumbled into town?" Beatrice asked. "All the time," Tanner admitted. I think about how close I came to losing you before I ever really knew you. If you'd gone to a different town, if someone else had found you first, if you'd been too proud to accept help. I was desperate enough that pride didn't enter into it, Beatrice said. I just needed to be somewhere Richard couldn't find me. I never expected to find love again. I'd convinced myself I was incapable of it. But you weren't, Tanner said, squeezing her hand. You just needed the right person and the right circumstances. I needed you, Beatrice said simply. Your kindness, your patience, your unwavering belief that I was worth saving, even when I didn't believe it myself. The years continued to pass peacefully. Thomas grew into a responsible young man who loved working the ranch with his father. The twins were inseparable, bright and curious, always into some kind of mischief. Henry was quiet and thoughtful, preferring books to horses but still helpful around the ranch. Beatrice's relationship with each of her children was different, shaped by her own experiences and her determination to give them the childhood she'd never had. She was affectionate but not smothering, protective but not controlling. She taught them independence and resilience, while also showing them what healthy love looked like through her relationship with Tanner. On quiet evenings, Beatrice would sometimes tell her daughters about the importance of choosing a good partner, about recognizing the warning signs of controlling behavior, about never accepting less than they deserved. She never went into details about her first marriage, but she made sure they understood that love should never hurt, that marriage should be a partnership of equals, and that they always had a choice. The boys learned by watching their father treat their mother with respect and tenderness. They saw how Tanner consulted Beatrice on major decisions, how he valued her opinions, how he shared the work of running the household and raising children. They learned that real strength wasn't about dominating others, but about protecting and supporting the people you loved. When Thomas was 18, he brought home a young woman he was courting. Beatrice watched carefully, noting how the girl smiled easily around her son, how she spoke her own mind without fear, how Thomas listened to her opinions with genuine interest. She saw in their interaction the kind of healthy relationship she and Tanner had modeled, and it filled her with quiet pride. "You've done a good job with them," Martha said one day as they watched the children playing. Martha had become one of Beatrice's closest friends over the years, a steady presence through pregnancies and childhood illnesses and all the daily dramas of ranch life. "They're good kids," Beatrice said. "They make it easy." "It's more than that," Martha insisted. "You and Tanner have given them something special. A home built on love and respect. That's rarer than you might think." Beatrice thought about her first home, the one she'd shared with Richard, where fear and violence had been daily occurrences. Then she looked at the house Tanner had built, filled with laughter and warmth and safety. The difference was profound. "I never want them to know what it's like to be afraid in their own home," Beatrice said quietly. "I want them to grow up believing that love is supposed to feel good, not scary." "You've given them that," Martha assured her. "Look at them. They're confident and happy and secure. That's because of you and Tanner." As Beatrice approached her 40th birthday, she looked back on the 15 years since she'd stumbled into Bentonville and marveled at the life she'd built. She'd gone from a broken woman who believed she was worthless to a wife, mother, and respected member of the community. The scars from her first marriage had faded, though they'd never completely disappear. But they no longer controlled her life or limited her joy. One spring morning, Beatrice woke early and went outside to watch the sunrise. The ranch was coming alive with the sounds of morning birds and cattle. In the distance, she could see Tanner already working in the barn, his silhouette familiar and beloved. She thought about all the mornings she'd woken in her first marriage, dreading the day ahead, wondering what would set Richard off. Then she thought about the mornings she woke now, reaching for Tanner, feeling safe and loved and cherished. The difference was everything. Tanner emerged from the barn and spotted her standing in the yard. He walked over with that easy stride she'd come to love, his face breaking into a smile when he reached her. "Good morning, beautiful," he said, kissing her softly. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," Beatrice said. "I was thinking about how lucky I am." "I'm the lucky one," Tanner insisted. "You've given me everything I ever wanted, a home full of love and laughter, children who make me proud every day, a partner who makes every day better just by being in it." "We're both lucky then," Beatrice said, leaning into his embrace. "We found each other when we both needed it most." They stood together in the morning light, holding each other close. Around them, the ranch was waking up, their children stirring in the house, the day beginning. It was an ordinary moment, one of thousands they'd shared over the years. But to Beatrice, each moment with Tanner was extraordinary because it represented something she'd once thought impossible, a life built on real love. "Do you ever think about what might have happened if you hadn't offered me that job?" Beatrice asked. "All the time," Tanner said. "And then I thank God I was brave enough to take a chance on a beautiful stranger who needed help." "I was such a mess," Beatrice said, shaking her head at the memory. "Bruised and dirty and so scared. I don't know how you saw past all that." "I saw you," Tanner said simply. "The real you, underneath the fear and pain. I saw a strong woman who'd survived something terrible. I saw someone worth fighting for." Beatrice pulled back to look at him, her eyes bright with emotion. "You taught me that I was worth fighting for. Before you, I'd accepted that my life would always be small and painful. You showed me it could be big and beautiful instead." "We showed each other," Tanner said. "You taught me what it means to truly love someone, to put their needs and healing ahead of my own wants. You made me a better man." Their youngest daughter, Eleanor, came running out of the house then, breaking the tender moment. "Mama, Papa, Henry won't let me help him with the chickens." Beatrice laughed, the sound full and joyful. "Let's go sort this out," she said to Tanner. Together they walked toward the house, Eleanor between them holding both their hands, chattering about her brother's unfairness. It was such an ordinary domestic scene. But for Beatrice, who'd once believed she'd never have children or a happy marriage or a peaceful home, it was everything. This was what she'd been too broken to believe in back when she first met Tanner. This simple, beautiful, real life built on love that healed instead of harmed. As the years turned into decades, Beatrice and Tanner grew old together on the ranch. Their children married and had children of their own, some staying in Bentonville to help run the expanding ranch, others moving to pursue their own dreams. But they all carried with them the lessons their parents had taught through example. That love should be gentle, that marriage should be partnership, that home should be a place of safety and joy. On their 30th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party. The ranch house was filled with family and friends, 3 generations celebrating the love that had started with a desperate woman and a kind rancher. Beatrice looked around at the life they'd built, at the family they'd created, and felt overwhelming gratitude. Thomas stood to make a toast, raising his glass. "To my parents," he said, "who taught us that love is patient and kind, that it protects and trusts and hopes and perseveres, that it never fails. Thank you for showing us what a good marriage looks like." Everyone raised their glasses, and Beatrice felt tears streaming down her face. Tanner put his arm around her, pulling her close. "Happy tears?" he asked. "The happiest," she confirmed. "I just keep thinking about that scared woman who came to Bentonville all those years ago. She could never have imagined this. But she was brave enough to accept help when it was offered," Tanner said. "Brave enough to believe she deserved better, brave enough to love again. She had a good teacher," Beatrice said, looking up at her husband. His hair was gray now, his face lined with age, but his eyes still held the same kindness and love they had the day they met. You showed me that being broken wasn't permanent, that love could heal even the deepest wounds. Love doesn't need perfect, Tanner said, repeating the words that had become their shared truth. It needs real. And this is real, Beatrice said, gesturing to the room full of family and friends. More real and beautiful than I ever dreamed possible. They danced that night, slow and close, surrounded by the people they loved. And as Beatrice rested her head on Tanner's shoulder, she thought about the journey that had brought them here. From broken to whole, from fearful to confident, from alone to surrounded by love. It hadn't been easy or quick, but it had been worth every difficult step. In the quiet moments before sleep that night, lying in the bed they'd shared for 30 years, Beatrice whispered, "Thank you." "For what?" Tanner asked, though he probably knew. "For believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself. For loving me when I thought I was unlovable. For showing me that my first marriage didn't define me, that I could have more, be more. For giving me this beautiful life." Tanner kissed her forehead gently. "You gave me just as much," he said. "You taught me what it means to truly love someone, to put them first, to be patient and gentle. You made my house a home. You gave me a family. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Beatrice Zimmerman." They fell asleep holding hands, the way they had for 3 decades, secure in a love that had proven itself real and lasting. Outside, the ranch that had been their shared dream and accomplishment stretched out under the Arkansas stars, a testament to what two people could build when they chose to love honestly and completely. Years later, when Beatrice was in her 60s and Tanner was beginning to slow down from a lifetime of hard work, she would sit on the porch with her grandchildren and tell them stories about the ranch. She'd talk about their grandfather's kindness and strength. She'd describe the hard work of building a life from nothing. And sometimes, when the oldest grandchildren asked how she and Grandpa had met, she'd tell them a carefully edited version of the truth. "I came to Bentonville when I needed a new start," she'd say. "Your grandfather gave me a job and a safe place to heal. And then he gave me something even more precious. He showed me what real love looks like." The grandchildren, safe and secure in a family built on love, couldn't fully understand what those words meant. They didn't know about Richard Morrison or the bruises or the fear, and Beatrice was glad they didn't. She'd worked hard to build a family where children grew up understanding that love meant safety, not danger, but she remembered. She remembered the woman she'd been, convinced she was too broken to deserve love. And she was grateful every day for the rancher who'd proven her wrong, who'd shown her that love didn't need perfect people. It just needed people willing to be real with each other, to grow together, to choose each other every day. When Tanner died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, surrounded by family, Beatrice held his hand and whispered her final thank you. For the life they'd built. For the love they'd shared. For proving that broken things, when handled with care and patience, could become beautiful. She lived another 5 years after his death, surrounded by children and grandchildren who loved her fiercely. She spent those years sharing the wisdom she'd gained through hard experience, helping other women who found themselves in situations similar to her first marriage, advocating for better protections for wives and children. On the day she died, peaceful and pain-free in the house Tanner had built, her last thoughts were of gratitude. For the courage to run from Richard Morrison, for stumbling into Bentonville on that fateful day, for having the strength to accept help when she needed it most, for believing Tanner when he said she was worth fighting for. But mostly, she was grateful for learning the truth that had changed her life, that being broken wasn't permanent, That real love had the power to heal, and that sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead us directly to the best ones. Her children buried her next to Tanner on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a simple headstone that read, Beatrice Morrison Zimmerman. Beloved wife, mother, and friend. She learned that love doesn't need perfect, it needs real. And for generations after, when her descendants faced their own struggles and heartbreaks, they would remember the story of their great-grandmother who had been broken but not destroyed, who had found love when she least expected it, and who had built a legacy of strength and resilience that lived on in every one of them. The ranch continued to thrive, passed down through the family, a lasting monument to what Beatrice and Tanner had created together. And sometimes, on quiet mornings when the mist rose from the valleys and the sun painted the Arkansas hills in gold, people swore they could feel the presence of the couple who had started it all, still there in spirit, still holding hands, still proving that real love, the kind that sees past the broken pieces to the beautiful soul beneath, never truly dies.